All right, horror fans, sharpen those machetes, because we're heading back to Crystal Lake, or somewhere nearby. Friday the 13th Part 2 is the movie that brought Jason Voorhees to life as a slasher icon, albeit with a burlap sack instead of a hockey mask. But behind those bloody kills and jump scares lies a treasure trove of production chaos, creepy coincidences, and behind-the-scenes secrets that even longtime fans don't know. From lost footage and real weapons to actor injuries and surreal alternate endings, we're counting down 20 weird facts that'll make you see the franchise in a whole new light. Fact 1. Jason wore a potato sack first. Before Jason became the hockey mask-wearing slasher we all know, he debuted with a potato sack over his head. That's right, a dirty burlap sack with a single eye hole. This creepy look was inspired by another horror flick called The Town That Dreaded Sundown, where the killer had a similar disguise. The result was a more grounded backwoods version of Jason, less supernatural, more human. Fans call him Sackhead Jason, and some even prefer this look because it feels raw and unsettling. The design also allowed multiple actors to play Jason without showing their face. Though the hockey mask would come later in Part 3, this budget-friendly burlap sack helped set the tone. Primitive, creepy, and iconic in its own right, it proved you didn't need a fancy look to be terrifying. Sometimes, less really is more. And this weird choice made Jason stand out in his brutal debut. Fact 2. The actress didn't know Jason was there. Amy Steele, who played Ginny, delivers one of the best fear performances in the film, and it turns out the fear was real. In the scene where Ginny hides under the bed, director Steve Miner didn't tell Amy where or when Jason would appear. He kept the direction vague to capture a genuine reaction. That's why her eyes dart around frantically, and her breathing is shallow and real. She didn't know how close Jason would get. The rat that crawls near her face? Also a surprise. Amy had to stay completely still while freaking out inside, knowing that at any second, Jason could strike. It's an old-school horror trick. Create authentic tension by keeping the actor slightly in the dark, and it worked. That moment is one of the most nail-biting scenes in the movie. Ginny's panic wasn't scripted. It was raw, real, and absolutely unforgettable. Fact 3. Muffin, the dog, may have survived. Or not. Muffin, the adorable dog from the beginning of the movie, is at the center of one of horror's weirdest mysteries. Early on, we see a furry, mutilated corpse, and everyone assumes it's Muffin. But at the very end of the film, Muffin shows up alive and wagging. What gives? Was that a different dog earlier? Is the ending a dream? The movie never answers it. Fans have debated for decades. Some think the reappearance was a hallucination, Ginny's trauma playing tricks on her. Others think Jason spared the dog for some bizarre reason, or maybe it's just a plot hole. Either way, the Muffin twist adds a surreal layer to the final scene. In a film filled with blood and chaos, it's that little dog's mysterious survival that still has fans scratching their heads. Fact 4. Real chainsaw. Real terror. When Ginny grabs a chainsaw to fend off Jason, you'd think it was a safe prop. Nope, that was a real working chainsaw. The production didn't have the budget for a prop version, so Amy Steele was handed the real deal. It had been emptied of fuel during some takes, but early on it was still capable of starting up. Amy had no prior experience using one, and the scene was shot quickly, adding even more tension. She later admitted her fear in that moment wasn't entirely acting. She was genuinely worried about hurting someone or herself. That raw fear bleeds into the scene, and it's part of what makes it feel so intense. Watching it now, it's unsettling to know how close things came to going wrong. In a film full of fake blood, that chainsaw was one dangerously real piece of hardware that brought genuine terror to the set. Fact 5. The MPAA butchered the kills. You might notice something strange about the death scenes in Part 2. They feel a little short. That's because the MPAA slashed the film harder than Jason himself. Most of the gory kills were trimmed down to a few frames. The original effects were designed to be graphic and shocking, but censors demanded major cuts. The infamous machete to the face scene was heavily edited. The double impalement? Practically blink and you miss it. And sadly, most of the uncut footage is lost. Unlike today's extended cuts, the negatives were tossed or taped over. Fans have been searching for the full versions for decades, but so far, they remain missing. It's a weird twist. a slasher movie that's been censored to the point where its most infamous scenes barely land. Yet despite all that, the film still became a classic. It just makes you wonder how much bloodier and more infamous it might have been if we'd seen the full carnage. Fact 6. Jason was played by a stunt coordinator. In Part 2, Jason wasn't played by a traditional actor. He was brought to life by stunt coordinator Steve Daskowich, and in some scenes, a different crew member stepped in. Because Jason's face was hidden by a sack, the filmmakers didn't need a consistent performer. Daskowich focused on the physicality, making Jason feel awkward, twitchy, and strangely human. He wasn't yet the unstoppable killing machine we know today. This Jason stumbled, groaned, even took damage. That unpredictability made him even scarier. Steve wasn't given detailed direction, just loose ideas like move weird or tilt your head. That rough, instinctual performance laid the foundation for Jason's character in future films. It's easy to forget now, but Jason wasn't a sure thing in Part 2. He could have come off as ridiculous. But thanks to Daskowich's raw and intimidating performance, Jason became something much bigger, a horror icon in the making. Fact 7. The opening scene recycled a lot. The first 5 minutes of Part 2 might feel familiar, and that's because they are. The film opens with an extended flashback to the final scenes of the original Friday the 13th. It wasn't just a creative decision, it was a budget-saving tactic. The producers used it to pad the runtime and remind audiences of Jason's origin story, particularly his mother's gruesome end. Back then, home video wasn't widespread, so many viewers hadn't rewatched the original. Reusing that footage helped new audiences catch up, but some fans felt it slowed down the film's start, especially for those who saw the first movie in theaters just a year earlier. Still, it became a signature of the franchise, reusing past scenes to set the mood. And it worked. That recap put Pamela Voorhees back in your mind just before Jason made his entrance, making her presence haunt the entire sequel. Fact 8. Alice's death was shot in one afternoon. Adrienne King, who played Final Girl Alice in the original film, returns in Part 2, but only briefly. Her entire role was filmed in a single afternoon, separate from the main shoot. She doesn't appear alongside the rest of the cast, and her death happens in the film's opening. Why? After the first movie's success, King was stalked by an obsessed fan. It shook her so much that she agreed to come back, but only for a short cameo. The studio obliged by killing her off immediately. The result is a shocking opener that mirrors Psycho's fake-out. The presumed protagonist dies early, throwing viewers off balance. It also symbolically passes the torch to Jason. Her death sets the tone for the rest of the movie. No one is safe. It's a chilling start, and it gave King closure, both in the franchise and in real life. Fact 9. The camp location burned down. The primary filming location was a real-life summer training facility in Kent, Connecticut. It gave the film that perfect isolated camp in the woods vibe. But years after the movie was released, the main lodge building used during production mysteriously burned to the ground. No one knows exactly what caused the fire. It just disappeared into horror history. That only added to the legend. Fans have long considered the Friday the 13th series cursed, and this eerie real-world destruction certainly added fuel to that theory. The remaining areas of the camp have since changed hands or fallen into disrepair, making it hard for fans to visit. The woods are still there, but the buildings you see in the film, gone forever. It's weird to think a slasher movie set became a haunted spot in real life. What was once Jason's hunting ground now lives on only in burned rubble and VHS copies. Fact 10. The wheelchair kill was nearly impossible to shoot. Mark's brutal wheelchair death is one of the most shocking moments in slasher history, and it was a nightmare to film. The scene involves Jason slamming a machete into Mark's face and sending his wheelchair rolling down a huge outdoor staircase. Getting that sequence right was tough. They used a dummy version of Mark for the fall, but making it look realistic, without the chair tipping, crashing, or flying off, took several attempts. Add in the fake rain, slippery steps, and stunt logistics, and it became a serious headache. But the result? One of the most talked about kills in the franchise. It's gruesome, unexpected, and bold, especially considering Mark's character is disabled, something horror rarely touches. The stunt was so impressive that even fans who don't love Part 2 still remember it. Behind the scenes, it was a pain. On screen, It was pure jaw-dropping slasher gold. Fact 11, Betsy Palmer was paid for a flashback. Even though Betsy Palmer doesn't appear in person in Part 2, her presence looms large, and she still got a paycheck. The film reuses her footage and voice from the original Friday the 13th, especially during the flashbacks and dream sequences. According to SAG rules, that meant she was entitled to compensation. Not bad for a role she thought would go unnoticed. Palmer once said she only took the part of Mrs. Voorhees in the original because she needed car money, yet her character became iconic. And in Part 2, she plays a major role without ever setting foot on set. Jason's shrine to his mother, complete with her severed head and sweater, wouldn't be nearly as disturbing without that echoing voice telling him to kill. She may be dead, but Pamela Voorhees is still calling the shots and cashing checks from beyond the grave. Fact 12. The ending was inspired by Carrie. That final jump scare, one where Jason smashes through the window and grabs Ginny, wasn't in the original script. It was added late in production and was directly inspired by the ending of Carrie. Producer Phil Scuderi wanted one last jolt to leave audiences unsettled, just like Carrie's infamous graveyard hand grab, so they threw together a quick, shocking final scene that still sparks debate. Was it real? A dream? A hallucination? The movie never explains. Amy Steele wakes up screaming and Jason disappears, leaving it wide open. That ambiguity gave the film an eerie, surreal finish. It also helped cement a horror tradition, the last-minute fake-out ending. Dozens of slashers copied the technique in the 80s. But Friday the 13th Part 2 did it early, and did it right. Even now, fans still flinch when that arm crashes through the window. It's a jump scare that never gets old. Fact 13. Jason's shack was built in a hurry. One of the most disturbing locations in the movie is Jason's shack, a dirty, handmade shrine to his dead mother. But here's the thing, it was never in the original script. The idea came during filming, and the art team had just a few days to build it from scratch using local materials. The result is creepy, chaotic, and exactly what you'd expect from a disturbed recluse living in the woods. The shrine itself, with Mrs. Voorhees' rotting head and her bloodied sweater, is deeply unsettling. Add in the flickering candles and grime-covered walls, and it feels like a scene out of a nightmare. The shack became a defining part of Jason's lore, appearing in future films and fan art for years to come. Not bad for a last-minute addition. Sometimes horror gold isn't in the script, it's in the desperation of a production crew making it up on the fly. Fact 14. Amy Steele refused to return for Part 3. Ginny was one of the smartest, most capable final girls in slasher history, so fans were surprised when she didn't return for Friday the 13th, Part 3. The truth? Amy Steele turned it down. After filming Part 2, she decided to pursue a psychology degree and step away from acting for a while. The producers offered her the lead again, even planning a storyline where Ginny confronts Jason in therapy, but Amy said no. As a result, they scrapped the idea and introduced an entirely new character. Some fans still consider it a missed opportunity. Ginny was clever, tough, and emotionally layered. Her absence left a void that later sequels tried to fill with mixed success. But in a way, her one appearance was enough. She outwitted Jason, survived the woods, and walked away. Not many can say that. Sometimes one perfect performance is better than an entire franchise run. Fact 15, there was a real-life stalker scare. Adrienne King, who played Alice in the original Friday the 13th, had a terrifying real-life experience after the film's release. She was stalked. The fan found out where she lived, called her repeatedly, and even followed her in person. It rattled her so badly that she asked for her role in the sequel to be drastically reduced. The producers agreed and killed her off within the first 10 minutes of Part 2. Her scenes were shot separately, and she didn't interact with the rest of the cast. It's a chilling example of life imitating art. Or maybe the other way around. King eventually stepped away from acting for years. In recent interviews, she's opened up about how the incident shaped her career and relationship with fame. While her time in the franchise was short, her impact was unforgettable. Sometimes the scariest part of horror isn't on screen. It's what happens after the premiere. Fact 16. Some actors didn't know they were in a sequel. Believe it or not, some actors in Part 2 didn't even realize they were filming a Friday the 13th sequel. The production operated under fake titles to avoid leaks, using names like Jason or A Long Night at Camp Blood. Scripts were incomplete, plot details were vague, and for actors who hadn't seen the original film, it wasn't always clear what they were stepping into. This secrecy created confusion, but it also worked in the movie's favor. The cast's unease and lack of context fed into the film's atmosphere. They didn't need to act scared. Many of them genuinely didn't know what was happening next. It's a strange tactic, but one that's now common in horror franchises. Studios often use fake names and redacted scripts to preserve surprises, but Part 2 was one of the first to do it. And in hindsight, that confusion added something special. Raw, unfiltered fear. Fact 17. The film was shot in just 6 weeks. Filming a feature-length slasher in 6 weeks sounds impossible, but that's exactly what happened with Part 2. The production was rushed, underfunded, and shot mostly on location in the woods. Cast and crew worked long hours, often in freezing conditions with little time for rehearsals or reshoots. Some scenes were done in just one take. They used natural lighting, minimal setups, and guerrilla filmmaking tactics to stay on schedule. It was grueling, but it gave the movie a gritty, realistic edge. You can feel the urgency in the final product. The actors looked tired and stressed because they were, and that raw energy made Jason's world feel more dangerous. Despite the rushed timeline, the film grossed nearly $22 million, a massive success on a $1.25 million budget. Friday the 13th. Part 2 proved that with the right idea, a creepy location, and just enough blood, you don't need time, just terror. Fact 18. There's an alternate ending that was never shot. Early versions of the script had a much darker ending. Jason follows Ginny to the hospital and decapitates her. No dream sequence, no escape, just brutal sudden death. But producers got nervous. They worried killing off the final girl after she survived the entire movie would be too much. They also weren't ready to push Jason into full supernatural territory. So the scene was scrapped before filming began. Instead, they went with the dreamlike ending, Jason crashing through the window, and left Ginny alive but traumatized. Fans still debate which ending would have been better. The original concept is more brutal, but the surreal ending we got became one of the film's most memorable moments. No footage exists of the alternate ending, just script pages and rumors. Still, it's fun to imagine, what if Ginny had died too? Would the franchise have gone in a totally different direction? We'll never know. Fact 19. There was real tension among the cast. Tensions ran high behind the scenes of Part 2. The cast was living in close quarters during the shoot, often in the same cabins you see on screen. There were arguments, hookups, cliques, and plenty of stress. The isolated location, long hours, and freezing temperatures didn't help. Some actors have since said they felt genuinely uncomfortable at times, not because of Jason, but because of each other. But weirdly, that tension might have helped the movie. You can see it in the performances. The stress, the anxiety, the edge. It wasn't all acting. When characters snap at each other or look exhausted, it's probably because they were. That raw energy made the movie feel more real. It wasn't just a slasher, it was a pressure cooker, and it gave Part 2 a gritty, grounded quality that's hard to fake. Sometimes a little behind-the-scenes chaos creates the perfect horror atmosphere. Fact 20. It cemented Jason as a horror icon. Friday the 13th Part 2 could have been a disaster. Jason didn't have his hockey mask yet. He wasn't undead. He wasn't even that polished. But fans loved him. The moment he appeared, sack on head, machete in hand, a legend was born. Jason tapped into something primal: rage, grief, and unstoppable violence. Unlike Freddy or Michael, he didn't have a costume or backstory figured out yet. But it didn't matter. He worked. Audiences were hooked. The box office success of Part 2 proved that Jason could carry the franchise forward. His design would evolve. The kills would get bigger. But the core, silent, brutal vengeance was already there. Part 2 didn't just continue a story, it introduced one of horror's most enduring icons. And it all started in the woods, with a potato sack, a mother's severed head, and a whole lot of bad luck for anyone near Camp Crystal Lake. There you have it, 20 weird and bloody facts about Friday the 13th Part 2. From lost footage to chainsaw scares, surprise dogs to real-life stalkers, this sequel didn't just continue the story, it launched a horror legend. If you're a Jason fan, hit that like button, comment your favorite kill, and subscribe for more deep dives into horror's wildest films. Until next time, stay out of the woods.
Muffin!